All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Your First Alert weather team here in Washington, D.C., are tracking what is now Hurricane Helene. This thing became a hurricane late morning. We're going to have the very latest for you, how strong the system is, how strong it's expected to get, and of course, where it's headed. We know that you probably have relatives, some of you, friends down in Florida. So we'll let you know the impacts. This storm system is really going to be far reaching. So we've got meteorologist Steve Rudin, we've got meteorologist Jordan Evans, meteorologist Mark Pena with us here to give you the details on this storm system. So feel free in the comment section to just ask your questions. Let us know, what you're thinking about, especially here locally this upcoming weekend, as we could see impacts. So I'll kick things off by saying, yeah, we knew that this would become a hurricane, and National Hurricane Center has done an excellent job, especially as of late with its recon planes going into some of the strongest part of this storm system. So we know now that, again, its winds are up to 80 miles per hour with gusts at 100 miles per hour, moving to the northwest at 10 miles per hour. And yes, it is expected to gain in strength with warmer waters and very little wind shear in this area of the southern Gulf. So big question, of course, is what can you expect? Steve, I know you've been looking at a lot of the cameras, as you always do.
Yeah, it's amazing how quiet and calm it looks right now. And this storm, it's hard to believe that before 11 o'clock, it was just a tropical storm. It was upgraded by the Hurricane Center to a hurricane, now a Category 1. And then as it moves over those warmer waters, the Gulf of Mexico, we're talking water as warm as 85, 88, 89 degrees. We're going to see it really begin to flourish. So even though you see a very quiet St. Petersburg beach right now, a lot of folks are getting ready. Even though St. Petersburg is not technically in the cone or the path, they're still going to see huge impacts with surge and with lots and lots of rain.
That's right. Yeah. And Jordan, the track of this storm system is so important, what that means for where some of the worst storm surge could be. Why don't you take us through the track here?
Yeah, the track, really the center just went to the east of Cancun. So technically no landfall there in the Yucatan Peninsula, but that's going to be the case as we get into tomorrow night. So we're talking potentially an after dark, after sunset type of landfall there in the Big Bend area of Florida. That center of circulation tracking anywhere between potentially Cedar Key up toward Tallahassee. You've got Apalachicola there as well. And as the storm continues to go inland, it'll just rain itself out and get wrapped up in this other area of low pressure. So that's the inland impacts, Veronica, as you'll talk about with rain and flooding. But in terms of timing, we're still talking major hurricane status, and rapid intensification is not out of the question. As Steve mentioned, the warm waters, the lack of wind shear, could the dry air get entrained on the backside of it and help weaken it a little bit? It's possible, but still all things are pointing toward at least Category 3 landfall.
And of course, Mark, this storm system is going to really be far-reaching as it unwinds itself, moving not just north, but north and northwest into areas of the Mid-South.
Yeah, it's interesting what's forecast to happen. Most hurricanes, they usually take, once they make landfall, they'll get caught up in the jet stream and take a northeasterly track. But what's happening with our forecast models, once it makes landfall, there's a separate area of low pressure that has a counterclockwise spin to the west of where Helene will make landfall. And what's going to happen is it's going to get caught up in that. And so that's why the forecast models have it steering more towards the northwest as opposed to the northeast, which would have brought it to our direction. So it's interesting what's going to happen, or at least what's going to happen as we watch this unfold. There's 3-4 days out, there's a lot of different paths that this storm can take. But what we're currently tracking with the current data that we have is that once it makes landfall, it's going to take more of a northerly track and then track northwest, and then basically just rain itself out, which is pretty unusual because, again, most of our storms, they take a northeasterly track once they make landfall. So lots of interesting data coming in on this right now.
Yeah, just how far-reaching some of the impacts will be with the storm system is huge. This thing will have a pretty large footprint or wingspan across.
I think I saw most of Georgia. The entire state of Georgia is either under a hurricane or some kind of tropical storm watch or warning, which is, again, really unique and unusual.
That's
know,
right. Yeah. With all that heavy rain that'll be going up into portions of eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, even around Kentucky, just so far from the center of the storm system. And around here, we're expecting some shower activity for Friday and the upcoming weekend. I think we may be faring a little better for the weekend, maybe not quite as soggy. But Steve, this radar here, we've got rain that's getting really close. I like that the hurricane force winds are actually going to stay just west of Tampa and St. Petersburg, but they're still going to be getting hit pretty hard with some strong winds and probably a fairly decent storm surge just north of there.
And when we talk about the widespreading impacts from this storm, I mean, it's not going to be just along the coastline or the Big Bend of Florida, but, we are looking at Atlanta, at Charlotte, that are major airline hubs for Delta and for American Airlines. A lot of flights, hundreds of flights in and out. And if you have travel plans, or if you have friends or family coming through Atlanta, going through Charlotte, there are going to be significant delays. And I hotly doubt that they're going to have planes taking off and landing as we move into late tomorrow night and then into the day on Friday, especially for Atlanta and Charlotte. So you think of the far-reaching effects across the country. We often see with airlines during storms, if you have a big storm in Miami, it impacts a lot of the country. And now we're going to have two hubs, two separate airlines with Delta and American all seeing heavy rain and those gusty winds. So be forewarned for travel. And Amtrak, I'm sure, is going to also probably discontinue some service because of the saturated grounds and with the trains and the weight of the trains. It's not a good picture.
Yeah, that's true. Such the reverberation, the domino effect that we see all the time. But hey, guys, for anyone who's done any time down in Florida, one of the things that Jordan and I was talking about yesterday is floridadisasters.org. For anyone who's even visiting Florida, you really got to know what the plan is on evacuation, because not everyone leaves at the same time. You are in a zone. And if your zone is called where you are, maybe you're, someone who's visiting Orlando, Disney, just vacationing down there, floridadisasters.org is an excellent resource for figuring out what it is that you need to do and when you need to leave. Of course, Jordan, these, Steve mentioned, far-reaching all the way up into Atlanta and South Carolina now, with the hurricane warnings that are down for Florida and the tropical storm watch all the way into western North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it's the tropical impacts, but inland, it's the flood watches that go all the way into Southwest Virginia. And then you've got the tornado risk. The Storm Prediction Center already has that 10% chance, which is a 10% chance of any given spot there in South Carolina could see a risk of a spin-up tornado. And very common with tropical systems, a lot of spin going on from the surface to 5,000 feet. But that's where we're going to be watching Georgia and South Carolina tomorrow for that outer band to move in with potentially tornado risk.
Yeah, I mean, now's the time, really. There was a question here from someone asking about the villages in Florida. So that is just east of Crystal River, just northeast of Tampa. You're going to be getting a lot of rain, and you're actually very close to the hurricane warning location. So you'll get some high wind. I would plan for power outages. I would plan for some very, very heavy rain. We're going to talk about the rainfall amounts in just a moment. But one of the areas, again, that I mentioned, just go to floridadisasters.org and you'll get your information on zones and if you are going to be asked to evacuate. So we've got tropical tornado risk with some of this system as it comes in. We also have some very heavy rain that'll be far-reaching. Areas around villages of Florida could see potentially around 3 to maybe 4 inches of rain, if not more. What I like about this system is that it is going to be fast moving as it gets off the coast, off the Gulf Coast. That'll cut down on some of the high rainfall totals. Still going to be able to hold on to a lot of wind, because a lot of times the faster these storms move, the ability they have to hold on to some of the higher wind for a bit longer. But look at the rainfall in Atlanta. I called my brother the other day. I said, hey, you better get get ready. You're way off the coast from where this thing is going to come inland, but look at the rainfall. And of course, areas like Asheville, North Carolina will get quite a bit of rain. Mark, you'll be working this weekend. Jordan, you'll be working this weekend, letting folks know about the amount of rainfall that'll be coming down. I mean, we're probably going to see flood watches. Jordan?
Oh, absolutely. And especially with big metropolitan areas like Atlanta, like Charlotte, even Tallahassee. These are areas that are covered in concrete, where even if you get the slightest downpour, you run the risk of flash flooding. So when you get several inches in a short amount of time, definitely going to be flood risks for sure. But also, again, what's interesting is how far inland those tropical watches go. That's the whole state of Georgia, as well as far western North Carolina. With tropical storm watches, that means that tropical storm conditions are possible in the next few hours for our friends and family in that. So again, along with the heavy rainfall that usually does come with any kind of tropical system, this is also going to have a far-reaching wind impact as well. So that's something that if you have family and friends that are in the path in areas like Atlanta, where they typically see heavy rainfall from tropical events, tell them to be prepared for the wind as well.
Mm-hmm. Somebody's asking about Niceville, Florida here, Jordan. That's just north of Destin. So you're on that far western panhandle of Florida. Why don't you tell them about some of the conditions with rain amounts and probably wind based on the center of where we'll probably see landfall?
Yeah, well, landfall likely to stay east. So to be on the west side of the center, that's the more favorable side because you're getting the offshore wind. So you're not seeing the water get pushed inland. So storm surge, not a concern there for the panhandle, really. But still, you'll have some heavy rain. You'll have some wind gusts, tropical storm force. So anywhere from 40 to 50, potentially 60 miles per hour. So still some tree damage is possible there around Destin, the 30A, Panama City Beach. But the impacts really are going to pick up once you get east of Panama City. I mean, Veronica, earlier, this storm was farther west toward Destin, Panama City. And at first, I thought this was going to be a repeat of Michael in 2018. But fortunately, this is moving faster. It doesn't look like it's going to be as strong. But the impacts in terms of, or the direction, I should say, is quite similar. Even yesterday, we talked about how similar this was to Idalia last year in 2023.
Mm-hmm. And definitely stronger than Debbie with its track this year. We should make that point. This will be a bigger storm system, stronger storm system than Debbie. Storm surge, of course, number one way that folks still lose lives with landfalling tropical cyclones. Right now, we're looking at areas that could be around 5 to, check that. What is it, over 10 feet in some areas from Cedar Key to areas like Crystal River. So big storm surge with this thing. And of course, we'll have the freshwater flooding, the saltwater flooding all through parts of Florida with the rivers and also, of course, ocean on land. This is a very cool animation. Jordan, I believe you downloaded this one earlier this morning, looking at just the hurricane hunters going.
And it looks like they're just now moving out of the storm. So that plane is leaving Helene, probably another one going in at some point later today. So we'll have to update our data. But again, this is where we get the information for the National Hurricane Center to update the category of the storm, the pressure falling, the winds increasing. It's the dropsondes out of these planes. They're devices that fall out of the plane, they go down to the ocean, record data. And of course, you've got buoys there in the water as well that are recording data. So again, a lot of things that are not helping just the National Hurricane Center, but the models. I mean, this data goes into the supercomputers and helps get factored into the model data that we show you on the air.
That's right. Yeah. And that's what makes for better and better tracks that we get, cone of uncertainty, which I'm going to put this up again, where it is right now and where it's headed. I know Steve is in and out with us as he continues to do radio for WTOP, which we will providing updates with the rain for Friday, the upcoming weekend. But again, this is what, folks want to see is the track of the system. Look at the rain bands coming north, Category 2, strengthening very quickly, especially on Thursday. The intensity with this storm system right through the central Gulf as it goes from a Category 2 to Category 3 before landfall. So there's landfall. Prior to landfall, some very, very heavy bands of rain extending all the way up into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, eastern Tennessee for hours. And again, we're talking about the potential for not just flooding, but also tropical cyclones. Someone's asking here about Dayton, Ohio. All right, so Dayton, Ohio, far from the center of the storm system. Mark, you want to take that one? I know you talked about the rainfall last time. So
yeah. So Dayton, Ohio, you're likely to be on the far fringes of some of the impacts of the storm. You'll notice there with that rainfall model that VJ has up right there. You're right on the cusp of where you could see, some tropical downpours, probably isolated to scattered in nature over the next couple of days. Flash flooding, likely not on the table for our friends in Ohio, but of course you want to just make sure that you're staying up to date with your local meteorologist. They'll have better ideas of some of the impacts that maybe a certain storm, a certain downpour, a shower or two would have in your particular area, as opposed to us here centered in Washington, not too familiar with some of like the topography, how certain drainage is there and everything. But one thing I did want to point out, VJ, back to the hurricane hunters. If you remember, I got to interview the director of the National Hurricane Center earlier this season. And one of the things that I took away from that interview is that along with our hurricane hunters dropping radio sondes that go through the hurricane, they're also sending out little drones from within the hurricane hunter airplanes that get more scans and more information than we've ever had before. So where we were just dropping, these little instruments and getting little snapshots as it fell, we're getting drones that are flying through the eye wall and getting so much data. So that all goes into what Jordan was saying, our supercomputers, our models and stuff like that. So some of the information that we're getting on these paths is significantly improving now with all the data that we're getting. And so that's something to take away with some of the forecast models that we're showing you here, is that this is advanced stuff. And it's interesting to know that our science is just.
that's right. Yeah. Along with sail drones, I think we lost Mark here for a little bit, but along with sail drone, which one of the areas that we really haven't had good data for is underneath of the storm system, just from the ocean floor up to the base of the storm system. And sail drone is a company that has been providing some of that data to NOAA to be able to improve the forecast. And while we talk about that, I'm going to load up a scene here so that we can see some of the model data.
Veronica, we do have a question about McLean. So back here in the DMV, just our local impacts real quick. This boundary that's slowly working its magic right now, which is providing us this current mess we're dealing with this week. That's fortunately going to push through, I think, by the end of the work week, Veronica. So that boundary, the farther south it gets, that may try to prevent some of this moisture from reaching. Still some outer bands coming in Friday or Saturday, light showers, but at least we're not forecasting tropical rains, major impacts. This will not be a repeat of what Debbie brought back in August. So we can be at least safe to say that that's what we're looking at for the weekend, just to answer that question here locally.
Right, yeah, and we've got folks who are watching us from all over here. Warner Robins, just south of Macon, Georgia. You'll probably see about 5 to 7 inches of rainfall and probably some pretty good wind gusts around 50, maybe 55 miles per hour.
Yeah,
so there's
that tornado threat too in central Georgia. That'll be for tomorrow as the circulation.
I'm going to head out, guys. I'm going to head out. I got a show at 2, but you're in good hands with everybody. I'll see you guys upstairs.
We'll be doing, of course, some more of these with our weather team. Yeah. So, folks, be sure to check back. We'll take 2 more questions here. Someone asking about Oxford, Alabama. So right now we've got Alabama that could see between 4 and 6 inches of rain, more and more as this storm system, its track is leaning a little more off to the west. That's where some of the heavier rains will be, but that may wait until it gets into northeastern portions of Alabama, northern portions of Georgia and Tennessee, as well as Kentucky. So again, you're looking at a couple of inches of rainfall. The wind, the strongest winds just to the east and northeast part of the core. So that'll be over mainly Georgia. And I'm afraid the higher elevations of Tennessee and North Carolina. And one more question here. We'll give that one to Steve. He's back from WTOP Radio here. Let's see, someone asking here, Yonkers, watching Yonkers, Westchester. Steve, you want to give us a recap real quick kind of on what we're looking at here, latest watches and warnings from National Hurricane Center? Steve, if you could unmute yourself.
Aha, there we go, like magic. You can see where the warnings are located right now. The hurricane warning along the Big Bend of Florida, that's the area that's in hot pink. And then you head down to the Key West over toward Miami and Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, and then over into Palm Beach. That is where we now have a tropical storm warning. So they're not going to get the brunt of it, but definitely looking at wind and heavy rain. But look at Atlanta. You know, that's quite a distance from the shoreline or the coastline, and they are under a tropical storm watch, and that will likely be upgraded to some sort of warning, I assume, as we head through the next 24 hours. And because they're really going to get socked in, I would say beginning tomorrow night and then probably extending to a good part of the day on Friday. And of course, we are going to look for perhaps even into Alabama, looking at some additional watches and warnings, then into eventually flood warnings and alerts for Tennessee, and then into Kentucky and southern Indiana and Illinois as this storm sort of rains itself out. But it's a fast mover, and it's going to really pick up speed once it does make landfall. And thank goodness it's not going to be one of these storms that makes landfall and then it gets stuck at just around moving 2 or 3 miles per hour. That's when you have big problems. I think I read that this is going to be moving upwards of 20, 25 miles per hour at some point.
It'll get picked up.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for your questions. Steve, Jordan, Mark, of course, everyone for coming on and being part of looking at Helene and its information. Bottom line here is for us here in the DMV, don't go changing your plans. It may not be a washout weekend at all for your Saturday and Sunday, especially if this track continues off to the west. So be sure to also head over to WJLA.com. We'll continuously be updating the blog for the rest of the week and the weekend. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.